Earlier this month, China sent numerous warplanes to conduct military exercises over the coast of Taiwan. The provocation sparked intense anger from Taiwan and its allies, with many seeing it as another act of Chinese aggression in the region. With a war-weary Taiwanese government, the US and its NATO partners must safeguard Taiwan's defense against its hostile neighbor. To better understand this situation, we must first examine why China is so antagonistic towards Taiwan to begin with. In the early 1900s, China was mired in civil war between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang. The Nationalists were led by Chiang Kai-shek, a brutal warlord who governed significant parts of China for much of the early 20th century. Meanwhile, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP for short, was led by Mao Zedong, another brutal warlord who primarily waged a guerrilla war against the nationalists. The communists fought a long drawn-out war in the country, eventually defeating the nationalists. In doing so, Chiang Kai-shek and his Kuomintang allies fled to a neighboring island and established the Republic of China, or in other words, Taiwan, creating a separate island nation. Despite forming a government in exile, Chiang Kai-shek vowed that one day he would return to the mainland and defeat the communists, unifying both Taiwan and the mainland. He of course never did. Shortly after taking control of mainland China, Mao turned the country into a communist state, the People's Republic of China, countering the liberal democracy created in Taiwan. Mao was determined to retake Taiwan early on during his rule over the mainland, but failed following strong support for Taiwan from the US, who saw the island as a strategic buffer, stopping the spread of communism throughout the Asia Pacific. Not to mention, it's also good to have an ally neighboring communist China. America and its NATO allies have historically vowed that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan would be met with stern military intervention. Both China and Taiwan see one another as part of their respective territory, as in, the People's Republic of China sees Taiwan as part of its nation. Meanwhile, the Republic of China, Taiwan, sees the People's Republic of China as part of its country. The reason as to why this is the case is because, technically speaking, Taiwanese people are of Chinese ethnicity. So it's like having a population of Chinese people on an island named Taiwan. While constitutionally this might be the way it is, both countries are indeed governed separately. The separate governance is of course for obvious reasons. Taiwan's liberal democracy is in direct rejection to the communist mode of governance on the mainland. Mainland China has longed for what it calls the peaceful reunification of China, specifically the mainland and Taiwan. In a bid to resolve the legacy of China's civil war between the communists and the Kuomintang, President Xi Jinping is trying to rally up domestic support for the ruling communist regime. The best way to do that is to agitate neighboring Taiwan, the last stronghold of democratic resistance within its territorial region, now that Hong Kong is firmly within its grip. Since the end of China's civil war, the mainland has tried numerous tactics to reunify with Taiwan, most of which passive through the stroke of the pen. Throughout the decades, there has been a push to isolate Taiwan diplomatically by encouraging neighboring countries to avoid recognizing Taiwan as a legitimate state. As a result, Taiwan has only had full diplomatic relations with 15 countries. China has often refused to engage in international treaties if it sees Taiwan as a participating member. The mainland's threat of economic boycotts has worked to coerce other countries into not acknowledging Taiwan as a partner during such agreements. After all, The size and magnitude of China's economic and military power is enough to force many countries into subservience, fearing disruptions to trade. However, growing tensions between the US and China due to the coronavirus has put Taiwan in the geopolitical spotlight. Many Western democracies are showcasing their support for Taiwan unlike ever before. Whether it be the US, UK, Japan, or even Lithuania, which became the first nation in Europe to permit Taiwan to have a diplomatic mission under its name, the show of solidarity is strong. So the recent Chinese military drills could be seen as merely a show of frustration over Taiwan's newfound support. Then there is China's domestic politics. President Xi Jinping is trying to rally up confidence in his leadership as he heads for the 2022 CCP Congress, when his second term of office ends. While he expects to stay on as president for a third term, shoring up domestic legitimacy by venting his ire at Taiwan is his strategy to keep potential rivals at bay. However, acts of further aggression is likely to be hindered by the onset of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. So Xi will have to establish a fine line between moderate and intense aggression as the world descends on Beijing in the coming months. Regardless, Xi has his work cut out. A military confrontation with Taiwan could likely spark a new global conflict. Meanwhile, there is little support in Taiwan for reunification. Many Taiwanese people view the recent developments in Hong Kong as a clear indication of what reunification with China might look like. A June poll found that out of the 4,717 Taiwanese people surveyed, less than 10% supported reunification. Like Hong Kong, Taiwan fears that any semi-autonomous governance plan with China could eventually lead to the curtailment of civil liberties years later. While it is unclear whether the US would actually go to war over Taiwan, if China does invade, the economic repercussions from the world's largest economy, combined with its NATO partners, could be severe on China. I would argue that the best strategy for Xi is to wait patiently. There are currently two things working in his favor. Number one, Taiwan is heading into elections in 2024. The Kuomintang, Taiwan's opposition party, supports a peaceful reunification with China. Xi could launch a rigorous cyber campaign spreading misinformation via social media channels in Taiwan, sowing the seeds of division in a bid to garner some popular support for reunification. If the Kuomintang subsequently wins, the possibility of reunification with the stroke of the pen becomes plausible. If this fails, there's option number two. China is soon set to overtake the US to become the world's largest economy. Its ally, Russia, and the numerous countries beholden to China through debt repayments as part of the One Belt, One Road initiative, provide significant diplomatic leverage. Through this process of building international leverage, China could be in a position within a couple of decades to successfully invade Taiwan and face little pushback from the West. With half of the world on China's side, there is little America could do other than start a new global war. But that begs the question, will America really go to war for Taiwan? After all, it's not New York or San Francisco. I'm guessing not. Therefore, I would argue that while the threat of either invasion or some form of peaceful negotiation for reunification is not imminent, it is certain to happen at some point in the future. China will not stand idly by for long. As Napoleon once said, China is a sleeping giant. Let her sleep, for when she wakes, she will move the world.